What's up, everybody? Welcome in to a Switched Sides edition.
Oh,
I
it
just
is.
realized that, even though we were talking the entire time in the restream before we went live. But regardless, it's a Switched Sides edition. If you're listening on podcast, that's because I'm on the side Ethan's normally on. And we're not going to switch it because why not? We might as well roll with it at this point.
Mm,
Because more importantly, Ethan, the Spurs got their second win in a row at home
mm.
after the rodeo road trip, this time against another playoff team from the Eastern Conference, even though last time it was from the Western Conference with the Thursday big win
Mm.
against the Oklahoma City Thunder that we did a pregame stream for. So you can check that out if you want. Um, but yeah, Ethan, let me pull it up here. 117 to 105 victory for the San
Mm.
Antonio Spurs at home, like I said, and more importantly, against a solid team in the Indiana Pacers. I know Tyrese isn't playing that well. He shot 0 for 7 last game. He didn't have a great shooting night tonight. So that does play a little bit of a factor. Like, I think we're catching the Pacers at a good time for us,
Mm.
but still, all of the stuff that we'll get into here tonight, Ethan, one of last win, Ethan, we kind of felt like the OKC win was the best win of the year, and I would still say so. But this has got to be up in that top three just for the completeness and the fact that the Pacers competed with us throughout the game, and we were able to withstand it and not make critical mistakes, which it feels like kind of all season we have in relatively close games.
It was definitely, well, I don't know about OKC was felt the best probably, but this might have been the
Right.
cleanest victory we've had, where it's like start to finish, like we didn't kill ourselves at any moment. I think we gave up a couple runs to Indiana, but that's to be expected. That's just basketball; it's the nature of the game. But at no point did it feel like we were like truly letting go of a victory or just throwing ourselves under the bus. It was a pretty decisive win, and just from a big picture perspective, it felt like probably the first game where we successfully and I don't want. Some of this might just be because they're having off nights, but we successfully executed the defensive game plan of stopping Tyrese Halliburton and minimizing Miles Turner's impact. I know he kind of caught fire a little bit late in the game, but really for the entire game, they were kept under wraps as that two-man game. And I don't know what Pascal's final stats were, but
Let
he
me pull
didn't
it
feel
back up.
super impactful offensively either. So I'm going to give our guys the benefit of the doubt there that we actually went out and succeeded in doing what we wanted to defensively.
Well, I would definitely agree with that. We were texting during the game. Ethan, you had some stuff come up during the game that kind of pulled your attention away at
Yeah,
times.
yeah.
But what I can tell you is that while the Pacers didn't have their best shooting night of all time, it also wasn't necessarily their worst either. But the point that I'm trying to get to is while a little bit of them being off shooting like has to do with them, I
Mhm.
would say that a lot of this does have to do with our defensive intensity on our rotations and specifically our closeouts,
Mm.
which I don't want to dive too much into the game flow too quickly, Ethan, because I have some of that written down there. But man, Blake Wesley, there were a lot of times that he got beat on possessions, but he would sprint back, just in time to stop a shot or force a pass off. I saw that from Devin early in the first half as well. Um, that was the thing that really stood out to me when it with this game being almost like a 10-point game for most of it.
Mm.
Obviously, like we said, the Pacers did have their runs at the same time. The thing that I felt like was the difference in how we were able to overcome, like I said, just maintaining that lead, despite the punches that the Pacers would still throw at us, is because of the defensive rotations and intensity off the
Mhm.
bench. Throughout this season, the biggest thing, that you can really see is the drop off. And the numbers back this up. This isn't just like a stats thing, this is a numbers and eye test thing. When you take Wemby off the floor, our
Mhm.
defensive numbers plummet. That stat that has been true for the Spurs, throughout the season for the most part, was not true tonight. And I felt like really that was my biggest takeaway was just the team defense and the effort and intensity there.
I think it's an increased level of trust. Jude, I think the help defender is helping with more decisiveness recently. And part of that is trusting that the guy that gets beat, like Wesley, like you were mentioning, getting and back to whoever's man is now open. Like there's more cohesion, a better understanding of rotations that's been very apparent.
Yeah, Absolutely, Ethan. But we're gonna spice up our post game shows a little bit. We're not
Mm,
just gonna do game flow here. Moving on, normally when we start these post game shows, we go through the box score and kind of just give our thoughts on the guys. We're gonna do it a little bit in a little bit different fashion now, Ethan. We're gonna be giving out some awards again. I believe we did that at the start of this season, but regardless, at some point we've done that in the past. So yeah, we've got a couple awards that we're gonna give out four specifically for each game.
mm.
Let me find them here in my notes. Okay. So the first one is the Wemby moment of the game because me and Ethan, we were thinking about doing traditional stuff like offensive player of the game, defensive player of the game, MVP. Sometimes Wemby could be all three of those that I just
Mhm.
mentioned, like he was tonight, for example, being the leading scorer, 6 blocks, and of course the 10 defensive boards as well, and just being a force on the boards in general. So we're spicing it up a little bit. We're going to basically have an award for him. Then we're going to have the second star of the game. So, kind
Mm,
of that duo, the other all star caliber player next to Wemby, if you will, which there are a lot of candidates for that tonight. And I don't know if
mhm,
any of them are necessarily all star level, but y'all get what I'm saying. Like the best supporting cast member next to Wemby. Then we'll have the bench player of the game, the best player that came off the bench, and then the unsung hero, which another name for that could be essentially, the most deceiving box score
mm.
player of the game, which Ethan threw at me over text. So those are our four awards. We'll start off with the Wemby moment of the game, Ethan. I'll dish it to you.
There's so many. Like it's honestly hard to pick one because his box score is, it tells the story. Part of me wants to just say all 6 blocks because they were all spectacular, but just to pick one moment, it's kind of a weird one. But late in the fourth quarter, Miles Turner was kind of hitting 2 threes in a row. They were going on a small run, and there was a big rebound where it looked like Miles Turner had positioning, and Wemby went up and grabbed it with one hand out of the air over Miles Turner. That was a big one for me, Jude.
Heck yeah. Like you said, with his blocks, like think about the two Shea Gilgeous blocks that were back to back in the
Mm,
OKC game on Thursday. Or I don't
yeah.
know if they were back to back, but I think they were pretty close to each other in the point of the game. There was one where he was like right under the basket and he swatted him, stuffed him right against the rim. And then there was another where he was kind of coming off a screen, driving to the rim on the right side, and Wemby just swatted it out of there, which kind of led to a transition start. But the reason I bring up both of those, Ethan, is because it really does feel like almost every night all of his blocks could be a moment of the game. And my moment of the game does include a block, but it's actually a sequence of plays. I'm cheating a little bit here, but
Mm,
since it's moment of the game, not play of the game, this is what I'm rolling with. And let me go back to my notes. I wrote it down. I believe it was in the second quarter. Let me find it. Yes. Okay. So he dunked on Jalen Smith in the
mm,
second quarter. And it was basically just kind of like he caught it, had 2 feet set, and then just slammed it down on him. It was a poster. And then on the next possession, he swatted somebody. I don't remember what it was, but it was basically a poster and then a block on the next possession. Um,
mm,
but there's, like you said, there's so many moments, and I wrote that one down, and I was like, this could be the Wemby moment of the game. And although there were a bunch of great plays moving forward, that one still does kind of stick out to me as like the
mm.
the most highlight play that I remember. He had another dunk kind of on Aaron Nesmith, where
Yeah.
Aaron Nesmith was like under him at the end, and he just the force of Wemby at the end of it kind of pushed him back, even though it wasn't like a complete poster.
Oh yeah, for sure. And just because you mentioned another one, I'm going to mention another one real quick. When he had the post up late, I think also in the fourth quarter, for which he passed out of it during that broken play to Jeremy Sohan, who hit that layup after not being involved in the entire play prior to that. That was a big moment.
For sure, for sure. And that's another thing I had written down that we'll get into a little bit more when we get into the game flow, but his passing ability as well.
Mm.
He had 6 assists tonight. The vision from him, kind of we talk about Zach Collins being that hub. Think about a 7-4 Victor at the top of the key. He's been finding guys on
Yeah.
backdoors in the past couple games more often. Um, but moving on to our second award of the game, and I got to think about this one a little bit. But the second star of the game, Ethan, who is that for you tonight?
This one was the toughest one to pick because it really could have been 3 different guys in my eyes. Uh, but I decided to go with Devin Vassell with 17 points, 5 assists, and 9 rebounds with 2 steals as well. And really, what put him over the edge compared to the other guys that I was considering was the 9 rebounds and 5 assist
Mm-hmm.
aspect to it. Like, he was really facilitating and finding other guys and playing with great energy and force to get defensive rebounds and push the pace. And then obviously being the sniper that he is. I know 7 for 20 is not the greatest efficiency, but he had a lot of clutch baskets down the end. And his explosiveness, finishing at the rim with finger rolls and a variety of shots, as well as his mid-range jumper and turnaround, was undeniably vital as the game came down to an end. When Indiana was sort of kind of making a little push, he kind of kept them at bay before we obviously exploded and ended up winning.
The two most consistent players on the team this year, if we're just being completely objective, it
Yeah.
has been Devin and Wemby. We've made the Batman and Robin comparisons throughout. Devin's off the dribble scoring, regardless of the situation and how we're playing that night. It's usually there. And a lot of the reasoning that you mentioned at the beginning, the 9 rebounds, 5 assists, 2 steals as well, contributing in other ways, even though it wasn't the most efficient night for him, but still taking high IQ shots despite the misses. Most nights Devin's, been having close to 25 recently. So you're not mad at the shots he's taking. It wasn't like he was taking low IQ shots or being a ball hog. And like you said, found other ways to contribute, throughout that. But just to be a little bit different, and because he got the starting nod tonight and really stepped up to the plate with Julian Champagny out, is Malachi Branham, who in a recent podcast episode we did, kind of previewing, I believe this was the All-Star break episode, maybe.
It could have been.
But regardless, it was one of our recent lives, I'm pretty sure. You said, moving forward at the end of this season, you felt like Malachi was a guy who's going to step up. And since then, he's had a handful of games where he's had double-digit scoring. He's looked much more aggressive. That was the thing that I noticed from him tonight. The steal that he had up there, he just went and ripped. I believe it was RJ Nembhard. I could be mistaken there. Obviously, one of the Pacers guards. But imposing himself. Pop called him out, and the coaching staff called him out and said he was too lackadaisical offensively and defensively. You can definitely see that he got the message. Had 18 tonight, 2 for 6, 7 for 13 overall. Was able to get some boards, like I said, but you also saw a lot of instances with him facilitating out there, even next to Trey Jones, and you see that with the 6 assists tonight. So really a solid overall game from Malachi, one of his best of the season.
That was my second choice, Jude. That was my second choice. He really stepped up scoring wise because of the inefficiency of Devin, but also, I don't think Trey played poorly, but to only have 2 points and 4 assists, like, he really had to step up as a playmaker too and as a facilitator and be just a threat at scoring. So, like, he was definitely vital to that starting lineup.
Yeah, and I know you mentioned you were considering 3 players. Who was the third?
Keldon Johnson.
Yes, that I figured when you said those 3, I was like, it's Devin, Keldon, and Malachi. But you know what? It's probably good that we gave both of those awards to Devin and Malachi, because the bench player of the game is probably about to go to Keldon Johnson. That's my pick, Ethan. I'm sure it's yours. Tell me why.
Need I say more than that he had, I think, 7 points in the first half, or first 3 quarters, and then ended up scoring 10 points in the fourth quarter. To me, he was a physical presence. I think his isolation post-ups in that fourth quarter really kind of helped propel the offense into a drive first kick out, and then the ball movement was crazy. He hit big shots. He hit clutch shots when it mattered most. 7 for 13 overall from the field, plus 6. I think the past couple games, maybe handful of games since he got benched, he's really been on an upward tick. And tonight, without him scoring those 10 points in the fourth quarter, it very well could have been an Indiana victory because they were on a small run of their own.
Yeah, 17 points total. You take that off the box score. I know that's simplifying it, but that would be a 105 to 100 win there for Indiana. What it reminded me of was Keldon last year almost. Yeah. The story last season with him averaging 22, being the team's leading scorer. It felt like in so many games he'd get 10 to 12 of those points in the fourth quarter. I remember being at the Austin Portland Trailblazers game when the Spurs played in the Moody Center. We got some more Moody Center games coming up here pretty soon. Also, those will be interesting. But like I said, last year in that game against Portland in Austin, at the end, I believe he had 12 fourth quarter points in that game. Obviously, that hasn't been as consistent this year with all of the adjustments with Wemby, yada, yada, yada. Go watch every post game that we've done over the season to kind of hear our thoughts on that. But this was reminiscent of last season and in a good way. Was able to get 4 boards, nothing crazy there. We're kind of playing him more on the perimeter too. I just want to touch on this. I don't necessarily want him to always take every 3. Still 3 for 7 tonight. So, 40%, not too terribly inefficient. But there's some times where, with Keldon being as big as he is, it's like, I want you to drive to the rack and use that physicality. We saw a nice transition layup from him. And, it's not that I don't want him to take wide open threes, because he made some clutch threes tonight. He even in the fourth quarter, he had a little sidestep that was a giant 3 after Miles Turner had just made one to cut the lead to 1. So I don't want to take that away from him, because I know that can be an asset, but I also don't. It feels like over the past 2 games, it's been like, okay, I'm going to shoot first. I'm a catch and shoot guy. And I know it seems like that's in the game plan a little bit, but I just don't want him to do that every time. Does that make sense, Ethan?
Absolutely it does, which is why I think the post-ups for him, especially in the bench unit, is such a great idea. I'm curious why it's not something we do every time we bring the bench unit in. Like, usually it's a late game thing where he'll get like a couple, and they usually work, Jude, especially if he has the size matchup like you're saying. Like, it's a high post up on the wing. He usually faces up, waits a second because the defender can only stand in the paint for 3 seconds. As soon as he moves out, Keldon drives, and he either draws a foul or he's able to hit just like a baby hook. So I think that opens up the rest of his game. So if we can like add that to the bench playbook just
Right.
more often early in the game, I think that's the adjustment that you're looking for.
Yeah, and I did like, another thing that I can think about from him from this game that he did well. We basically had like an ISO where we set him up on the left wing, and I believe he was matched up with RJ Nembhard. I know I mentioned him earlier, and he could just easily go in, big body, baby hook.
Yep.
And they did that almost twice. I think the second possession, he didn't score on it because it led to an assist.
He kicked out.
Exactly. That's the type of stuff. When you've got a mismatch with him where he can drive inside, what does that lead to? Open shooters. That was the appeal of having Keldon on the bench, from the beginning. So with the team really just looking connected tonight, in sync, having a lot of synergy, this is kind of the benefits that you can have with some of these guys. So really the main thing is, though, for Keldon, he was crucial in fending off any potential fourth quarter comeback with those 10 fourth quarter points.
1,000%, Jude.
And this brings us to Unsung Hero, Ethan, or deceiving box score of the game. There's one that stands out pretty obviously to me, but there's also somebody that we haven't mentioned here that maybe it doesn't fit the deceiving box score. And that's who I'm going to go with. I'm going to start this one, Ethan.
Go ahead.
I'm going to go with Jeremy Sohan. I know that he has 12 points, 8 rebounds, 4 assists. That's like a typical Jeremy game, 6 of 8 on efficient shooting. But I feel like because he didn't force a lot, and you see it with the plus minus at plus 11, I think he just did. It was a normal Jeremy game, like, we were kind of mentioning. But I just think he was the perfect Swiss Army knife tonight. I know we had that instance in the fourth quarter where he basically had a semi argument with Pop during like a crucial possession, and then he decided to cut and went and got a layup afterwards. But yeah, there are a lot of other candidates for this. Like, I'll just say this, like Trey Jones is one that looks that kind of stands out to me. You could also say Blake Wesley is as well down there. But I think like I said, not a crazy stat sheet for Jeremy. I'm trying to figure out how exactly I want to verbalize what I'm thinking. But like, really the best way that I can put it is just the perfect Swiss Army knife game from Jeremy, where he doesn't try to do too much either.
Yeah, right place, right time tonight for Jeremy Sohan. And he was able to benefit from guys like Victor Wembanyama, Devin Vassell, Keldon Johnson kind of being aggressive scorers. As a cutter, he was very good tonight. As a defender, he was very multifaceted. And one of the comments even mentioned it, guarding McConnell when McConnell was on that great run for Indiana. He was really the only guy that was doing somewhat of a good job defending him. I mean, TJ McConnell just caught fire. So nobody could stop him. But Jeremy probably did the best job. And he also had to guard Tyrese from time to time, Benedict Mathurin. He was moved around a lot. So he was who I had down for unsung hero as well, Jude. But just to give someone else some praise, I'll talk about Trey Jones. Only 2 points, only 4 assists, plus 16 in the box score. Only took 2 shots, but really he didn't need to shoot all that much because of Malachi and Devin kind of being those guard scorers for us, and obviously Victor playing as well as he did. But he still did Trey things. He moved the ball around, got everybody some shots, pushed the pace in transition, and didn't make any mistakes. He had 0 turnovers in 30 minutes of play. So he definitely does not deserve any negative hate from the comments if you're just reading the box score.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a reason he's plus 16,
Mm-hmm.
despite just having 4 assists, 2 points. He did a lot of good things setting things up. And the other thing is, we mentioned Malachi earlier having 6 assists as well as
Mm-hmm.
Wemby tonight, and even Jeremy as well. I mean, everybody in the starting lineup had at least four.
Mm-hmm.
So that'll definitely impact, stealing some of those from Trey a little bit. But really Malachi, there were so many times where, he kind of just said, like, they just let him get out of the way. Or if
Mm-hmm.
Trey got out of the way, just let him play make, and he would kind of stand in the corner as a spacer. Um, and that was the thing that really stood out tonight, like we said when we talked about with Malachi. But the other side of that is that's another thing that takes away from some potential assists for Trey, and that was literally just a nature of because because Julian was injured tonight. So if Julian Champagny plays, like maybe Trey has a little different of a stat line. You know what I mean?
Most definitely. Most definitely.
But yeah, those are the awards there, Ethan. So I've got the Wemby dunk and block in back-to-back sequences for my moment of the game. You had one of his other blocks later in the game. And then for the second star award, I had Malachi, you had Devin. The bench
Mm-hmm.
player of the game, we both had Keldon. And then for unsung hero, we had Trey Jones and Jeremy Sohan. When you mentioned his defense, Ethan, that was another thing that I forgot to mention. In the beginning of the game, he was matched up on Halliburton a lot, or
Mm-hmm.
Mathurin, they'd switch him a lot. All of these guys, even he's matched up on Pascal. Those are three of their
Mm.
top scorers. And that just ties into, once again, how he's a Swiss Army knife, even when it comes to his switchability defensively.
Yes, sir. The versatile Swiss Army knife of Jeremy Sohan. We love him.
Yes, sir. All righty, Ethan. Well, we will jump into the game flow now. And we've already talked about a bunch of it, so I don't think this will necessarily be as long as some of our others. But do you want me to get started with the first quarter here?
Please, sir. After you.
All righty, let's do it. So this was the biggest margin of victory for San Antonio. Won the first quarter 26-16. The first thing I noticed was, okay, Malachi's in the starting lineup. That probably means somebody's injured. And then I found out Julian was out.
Mm.
Um, but it was a pretty defensive first 3 minutes of this game, Ethan, to start. It was only 7 points, 4-3. We were up. But after that, on the next 2 minutes, the Spurs went on an 8-0 run to go up 12-3. There was a great give and go from Malachi and Jeremy. We saw that even later in the game as well. So it was nice to see their connection building to start. Malachi was hot from the beginning. Not just was he, in rhythm with his teammates on that give and go, but then he hit a three right after that. We were making extra passes. We looked connected from the start. And the tone that we set, was important because it was something that, and maybe we've kind of set this tone before, but even then, it still looked a little bit different to me, Ethan, even from the jump.
Mm.
Um, and that's why I kind of had confidence moving forward, and the fact that we were able to keep it, that that just made it even that much more important with the way that we started the game.
Mm.
Um, because to keep that intensity and that connectedness, and to keep that kind of same feel and look, we set the tone early, is what I'm trying to say there.
Mm.
Devin started to get hot after that. The defensive intensity, I wrote that down. We had solid improv this game as well. There was like one play where I think there was a missed pass that like bounced off Wemby's elbow and it went straight to Malachi in the corner, who pulled up in rhythm and hit another three. Blake had a nasty, you could call this like I don't know if you would call it a poster, but I would still say that he dunked on Benedict Mathurin. And this was also kind of an improv play where I believe was after a tip out.
Mm-hmm.
And he got it like near the half court line. Blake did. And he just he turned on the turbo jets like it was 2K. And we already
Mm-hmm.
know how fast Blake is. And he took off and soared and got a nice dunk there on Benedict Mathurin. So that was great to see. We've seen Blake try to pull out the posters. He's your boy. I
Mm-hmm.
texted you, Ethan. I said he did that one specifically for you, with you in mind.
It's my guy.
um, but the other thing I noticed, we've talked about this a little bit already. We were doing better on closeouts from the jump. I really noticed this from Devin. There'd be times he'd maybe get beat on the screen, whether it was off ball or on the ball, and it's just a hustle, man. Like
Mm-hmm.
I hate to just talk about that because that feels like such coach speak and putting it so simply, but that's really what it comes down to. There were a lot of times earlier this year, oh, it doesn't seem like we have enough. There's a bunch of space between me and this guy. I might as well just give up right now. And then they're going to have an open look where it's like, even if you have somebody running at you, Ethan, think about if you're shooting, like you're going to be more affected if you have somebody running at you diving, even if they don't get anywhere close to necessarily contesting your shot. Like that's going to at least have some impact instead of just being wide open. So
Mm-hmm.
I think that's something that I've noticed, and we talked about that a little bit already. And then just as a last couple things here, obviously solid quarter. We played with pace and intensity and got stops consistently. And that
Mm-hmm.
was why we were able to win this one by 10. So, and the other thing that's also key, not as much of a defensive drop off when Wemby left. Intensity was the key. I talked about that at the beginning of the live. And it really showed in this quarter the most.
Well summarized. I think your point about the hustle being a huge component of this win, and really the past few games, stems back to what we talked about all the way back to game one, preseason, week one. And that's just these guys don't understand how to play with each other right now. And defensively, that is the biggest component to a good defensive team is trust in your teammates, understanding of rotations where you're supposed to be. So they have hustle and they have energy, but it's compounded with a confidence level and an understanding of actually what they're supposed to do that is only now starting to rear its head. And I think that's what's super exciting for us as some people that have watched almost every single game is seeing that step by step, build up to now. I don't think we're going to win the rest of the games for the rest of the year, but we're finally starting to see results. They're translating to 2 wins in a row, and confident wins that don't feel like a team that just kind of gave it to us. Like we competed the entire time and executed. But that leads me into the second quarter here. Like Jude said, I was semi-distracted for that first half. I was on the phone, so my notes are kind of broad, so I apologize if you wanted specific play-by-play notes here. But I also made some of the same points as Jude. Great energy and pace to start, great ball movement, player speed, and player movement. Wemby continuing to do Wemby things. I mean, it's hard to even put into words what Wemby's able to do. Just a 3-level scorer. There's no way you can stop him once he has his vision set on the rim. I think we're going to him in the post more often, which opens up everything else for us. But even still, we lost the quarter 32-26. So defensively, I felt like we were giving up a little too much in the lane. We were allowing guys to get right underneath the rim, kick out for wide open shots, and that's kind of what allowed Indiana to go on a small run and ended up winning the quarter 32-26. But we kind of expect if we dominate one quarter for the team to respond in some form of fashion. But usually that's like a 10 or 15 point loss for the Spurs, right, Jude?
Right.
When teams are making adjustments. So for us to keep it within 6 and, to still have focus and energy and for it to feel like a competitive game going into halftime, I saw that as a win for the Spurs.
Yeah, and the way we closed that quarter
Mm-hmm.
also, that hurt us as well. I don't know how many points we gave up, but I believe with like um man, well, we were up 10 with 7 minutes. Then the Pacers had a counter run with 5 minutes, and I
Mm-hmm.
didn't. There was a drop after notes after that. I think we had another counter run where we kind of went back up to 10, and then
Mm-hmm.
around the minute 30 mark, I have counter run written down. So I'm pretty sure that's when the Pacers were really starting to get in their groove offensively, and they ended up cutting it to 1. Wemby did have a clutch 3 where Keldon drew attention, kind of driving inside, and then
Mm-hmm.
dished it to him the left side for a wide open 3 in the corner that was big. But it didn't necessarily need to be a 4-point game there. It could have
Mm-hmm.
been bigger. And if you take off we lost that quarter by 6, yeah, that would make it a lot closer. If you just get 2 of those possessions, you get stops, then you
Mm-hmm.
only lose that quarter by 2.
And what agreed, first of all, but one other point I forgot to mention that I see in the comments a couple times here is Zach Collins needs a shout out for that end of the first quarter, kind of beginning of second quarter minutes. He played well tonight. and 11 points in 16 minutes of play. Only 2 boards, 2 assists, but those 2 assists were big. Backdoor cuts, great passes as per usual that led to a foul in one situation. He just feels like he's playing with a little more physicality. He's still not winning every
Yes,
battle. He's
he
still
is
not
though.
without his deficiencies, but he's playing with more confidence and more physicality.
He's playing a lot better, and that definitely ties in, at least over the past 2 games or past
Hmm.
couple games.
Yes.
And that ties into exactly kind of like what I think is the biggest point in this game is our bench defense, not
Hmm.
just it being like a complete fall off of a cliff when Wemby comes out. And a lot of that does have to do with him. And there were a lot of contests that he had. And the other thing is because he's being more physical, sometimes that, he'll kind of get shoved a little bit on the contest like afterwards, which allows other guys to go get boards. You know what I'm saying? Where really
Hmm.
he's responsible for that rebound even being possible. So got to give him credit there for sure. And we'll get to some of the comments here at the end when we finish up our game flow. We're just going through all of the post game show, like we said, with the awards and the game flow. Ethan, are you ready to get to the third quarter?
After you, sir.
All righty. So Wemby had a block to start. That was the
Mm.
first thing I wrote down. Immediately got a block. That was nice to see. Sohan made up for an inbound turnover where there was a little bit of miscommunication. I believe it was, I can't remember if it was Keldon or Wemby on the inbound, but regardless, we turned the ball over on an inbound, and Sohan was already like, basically running to the offensive side because it was an inbound, and he like sprinted back and got a block that erased that turnover. So that was a big play there from him. Wemby had a crazy shot after that. I don't remember what it was, but I wrote down crazy Wemby shot. There were a lot of those that happened tonight. It was some sort of step back on somebody. And the other thing that I noticed here to start was Sean said guys moving slower to start the second half.
Mm.
And although we won this quarter 34-29, at the beginning, Indiana was scoring on us a little bit, just giving it, I don't think they took a big lead or anything. They might have got close to tying it or tied it. But we were kind of going shot for shot there. And that was because the intensity had dropped off a little bit. And Pop had to call an early timeout. Actually, they did end up gaining the lead because I wrote down early timeout with Indy gaining the lead. And as soon as we took that timeout, Pop nipped that in the butt real quick. Like, hey, just because you're up a little bit or because we're coming at a halftime, we can't be lackadaisical in the second half on our rotations. It doesn't matter how dead you think the play is. Just, trail after the screen or whatever. Just go to your man,
Mm.
like I said, run at them, jump. Even if it's super late, just try to do something. And that intensity and effort picked back up after that timeout, which was what allowed us to win this quarter, really, in my opinion. There was a lot of Wemby vision in this quarter. I wrote that down. We talked about the backdoor cuts that he's been able to see. There were multitudes of those. And there are just some other assists that he was able to see in this quarter and throughout the game. Finding guys that's another evolution of his game. We're gonna see some triple doubles from him, not just with blocks but with assists. Maybe
Mm.
not this season.
Quadruple doubles, Jude.
That's what I'm thinking about too. But moving forward, like when as he continues to grow as a passer, which he's already naturally gifted at, and he's naturally unselfish as well. Um, we're gonna start seeing. We're just gonna continue to see more of what we've already been seeing at probably a more fantastic rate, if that makes sense. I know that's
Hmm.
a weird way to describe it, but what I'm trying to say is that like the stuff that he's doing, he's going to do it in a way that looks even more insane because he's going
Mm.
to evolve somehow. This is just the beginning.
Mm.
He was filling up the stat sheet. He was already at like 17, 5 and 2 or something, something that would be a solid game for somebody at the end of the game. And the crowd were getting hype off the dribble threes.
Hmm.
It's so nice to be home, Ethan. Obviously, the crowd's going to get hype off the dribble threes, but the moment that he hit this one, it caused Indiana to call a timeout. And it was after we kind of had a counter run, and I believe we went up by like 6 or 8 or something like that. And so when you hit an off the dribble three as a 7'4" guy in
Hmm.
San Antonio to kind of extend the lead a little bit and force Indiana to call timeout, that's a big moment in the game. He had an insane step back on Pascal right after that. Another great Jeremy backdoor to Malachi. So We saw their connection, with off-ball movement, whether it was Jeremy and or Malachi cutting, a little bit of a connection building there. Saw that a couple times tonight. We got the lead back up to 11 by the 2:46 point in the game. We had increased intensity and effort. I know I've been talking about that already, but once again, that was the key. And the other thing I also noticed, Ethan, more convos on the bench with Pop, like the
Mm-hmm.
whole team, whether it's Devin, Keldon, Wemby, and we've already seen those. Those have happened, but they're happening more frequently in the game. And I think it's because the guys are starting to understand the scheme more. Like
Mm-hmm.
you alluded to with the team defense, kind of the mental aspect of it and everybody knowing where to go combined with the athleticism aspect of it, really kind of allowing our team defense to blossom. You're starting to see them conversate with Pop more on the side, which I love to see. And the last thing I had written down was another note about Zach. He's just being used more as a hub as of late
Mm-hmm.
as well in the offense, which I love to see as well. And he has a lot of hockey assists too, or even if it's not a hockey assist, he'll set up, the set that we're running.
Mm-hmm.
And if that leads to a score at the end, even if there's not an assist for him necessarily, he was still integral in making that an efficient offensive possession.
Only two things, great summary. Only two things I want to add to is you mentioned his off the dribble threes, Wembanyama, 3 for 4 tonight, and it looks way smoother and way more confident. So I'm excited that his percentage has been increasing in the second half of the season. And then Pop, conversing more with his players on the bench, calling that timeout, screaming and yelling. It feels like to me, Jude, we're seeing more of the Pop that we used to see back in the day
Yes, I
when
had
we
that
were
thought too.
competing. And that's a recent adjustment because at the beginning of the season, he was not like this. And now I don't know if it's just because he wants to hold these guys accountable or if it's just he's sick of losing. Either way, I'm a fan of it. I'm glad that he's doing it. Um, but that will bring us into the fourth quarter. Well, I actually do have detailed notes, which I'll read for everyone's enjoyment. Um, Again, a nonchalant inbound pass leads to a Blake foul and 2 free throws for Indiana. We got to focus in crunch time. Whoa.
Didn't mean to do that. My bad.
You made yourself small. For a second, I thought you were doing that on purpose.
I
I was
was
like, you
just
don't
trying to
have to
pull
do
up
that.
this comment and that happened. Funny little podcast moment
It was
there.
like, I appreciate the spotlight, you, but there's no need. There's no need. We're co-hosts. Um, Love the Keldon post-up isolations when he has the size mismatch. We already talked about this at length. Play to his strengths. While he can be a catch-and-shoot guy, I'd much rather him drive to the basket and either kick out for open threes or hit the shorter defender with baby hooks or just try and get fouled and get to the free throw line. Keldon had a couple threes off of post-up kickouts and swing passes. Everyone's moving the ball well. Hockey assists galore. That's why everybody in the starting lineup had 4 assists or more. We're keeping the offense simple. We're posting up, whether that be Keldon early or when we transitioned over to Wemby, and we're spacing out and moving off of screens. We're finally playing well in the half-court offense. Attacking the rim, Blake Wesley as the point guard coming off of screens when Indiana blew up our play, debatably because they're fouling our guys on back screens. But regardless, he was able to take advantage of the mismatch on TJ McConnell, blow past him, and finish not with a dunk, but with a layup, which is nice for him since that's what he struggles with the most. And he admits to struggling with finishing with finesse rather than with strength. Keldon had a fadeaway jumper, Jude. That's something I haven't seen in a long time, and it went in. We can't stop McConnell. I made this note a few times, so I'm just going to say it once. We could not stop him in the fourth quarter. I don't know why. He's a mid-range magician. You texted me, said he is Steve Nash in his prime reincarnate. It's like, yeah, that's a pretty accurate representation of what's going on right now. But
He
at the end of
was
the day,
tonight, man. Sorry to
no, you're
interrupt you.
good. You're
That
good.
was just crazy.
At the end of the day, if someone's going to kill us, I would rather us let TJ McConnell hit mid-range jump shots than let Tyrese Halliburton go crazy or Miles Turner or Pascal Siakam. Like, I'll live with TJ
We're
McConnell.
lucky Doug didn't play. We haven't
We
talked
are.
about that.
Was he injured or did he just not
He
play?
was injured. Yeah.
Because we talked about that in the past, how Doug McDermott, the revenge game, is going to go crazy. I'm glad he was. I'm not glad he was injured. I'm glad he didn't play. I hope he gets better. Contesting threes well. Fundamental contest, like you talked about. Devin's explosiveness needs to be talked about more. Not as a finisher, not as a dunker, but just lift off into the air, and then he can finish with a variety of finger rolls off the glass, Alex English, George Gervin type We need to talk about that more often. And on turnaround jumpers. Like, he's jumping high into the air. Plus, with that high release, it's no wonder no one can block his jump shot. When Wemby sat, it led to six straight points for Indiana, all of which were in the paint. We called the timeout. We brought him right back in. We are not about to lose this game when we're up as much as we are. And that's when Keldon Johnson hit that clutch sidestep 3 over TJ McConnell. Love that from him. That's a tough shot. So for him to knock that down bodes well for him going forward. Turner hit 2 threes right in our face. I felt really sick at this moment in time, Jude. I really thought they were about to come back and win, because when Miles Turner's walking into threes, it's not good. It's not good for us. But Wemby's defense forced Turner into a turnover. He walked with the ball. He also had a block shot. So we were able to capitalize and retake the momentum and basically run away with it from this point forward. Wemby had an and one. Pascal Siakam got called for 2 fouls off back screens where he was basically just grabbing Wemby, because what else is he supposed to do when you have a 7'4" guy moving like prime Marco Bellinelli off of screens? He basically has to foul him at that point. Massive rebound for Wemby with 3 minutes left. Wemby to Sohan off that double team that we talked about, being at the right place, right time. Again, Sohan with a tip back to put it back to 13-point lead.
Yes.
And then finally, Jude, the Jeremy Sohan slam to finish it off. Spurs victory 117-105. Play me my theme music.
That's exactly how I felt, Ethan. It was just to get 2 straight wins against playoff teams after this rodeo road trip.
Mm-hmm.
Very satisfying. And you mentioned the way Jeremy ended the game. That's another reason why I chose him as the unsung hero. I know that kind of pops up in the stat sheet, but those were some clutch buckets to kind of put the Pacers away, in the big moments. I believe it was either 6 or 4 points from him.
6 in the fourth quarter.
It was 6, yeah. So that was a 6-0 run there. I don't know if it was a 6-0 run, but he scored on 3 straight possessions for the Spurs, their final 3 possessions. So that was another little bullet point under why I gave him that award, Ethan. But that pretty much sums this one up. As you can see, though, I'm looking here on our screen, Ethan. This is so satisfying, especially also because look at the regular season series right in front of us.
Oh, man.
And look at the last game in November, and look at this one.
Mm-hmm. That's crazy.
I remember that game because I was in Florida for that one, and all the Florida games were just like bad. Maybe I should never go back. It's a sign.
Agreed. Never leave.
No, but seriously, a 41-point loss to a 12-point victory. Great stuff from the San Antonio Spurs tonight. And Victor Wembanyama, I don't know why it's defaulting to this tonight, Ethan. I fixed the audio issues on the ESPN site so we don't get any Burger King ads playing while you're talking. But I guess now we got this tonight. It's always something. I'm just waiting for the balloons.
That's what I was about to say. I'm waiting for the balloons.
Well, I'm listening to a different podcast, and it was an LSU show that I was watching, and the dude's like, yeah, I just got this new computer. And it was right after the balloons popped up. The dude he's having on, he's like, what's with the balloons? He's like, I just got this new computer and I don't know how they pop up. And I know I've mentioned that before, but still, every time I see a different podcast go through it, it makes me so happy because, once again, I know I'm not alone.
That might be the most I've laughed on this podcast, is like the second or third time those balloons popped up, because your reaction is what makes it for me, Jude. Because you're like watching yourself and then you see them and you're like, there are those dang balloons again.
I just wish I knew like how I triggered them, and then it's like I Google it and everybody's like, I don't know how, they just appear, and then I'm like, so we're all just prisoners to Apple's balloons, but I guess they're nice.
It makes me happy, and that's what's most important.
Well, you know what else makes me happy, Ethan?
A Spurs W, Jude.
But you know what makes me arguably even happier than that?
Dom Barlow having a standard NBA contract for the San Antonio Spurs, Jude?
Yes, we have to talk about it. We have to talk about it. Not just because we just made a video on it that y'all showed love to, where I said I didn't think it was going to happen with the way things had gone. But I am happily wrong, Ethan. And the other thing I would like to say about that too is it's like we were sending him back down to the G League like right before that. I felt like just after we made the trade, and I know Marcus Morris was technically still on the roster, but I felt like if we were going to do that, we would have just already done it by that point. Like, that's why my faith was waning in it. I wasn't like, oh, we shouldn't do this. It was just like, it just kind of seems like they weren't like at this point. And like I said in that video, with him being 20, and still maybe having some benefit from being down in the G League. But regardless, Ethan, the Spurs announced that after waiving Marcus Morris, they have converted Dominic Barlow's contract to a full-time contract with the San Antonio Spurs. I'm very sad we didn't get any Barlow minutes tonight, but I still think that is an indication that in these last couple weeks, Ethan, we're definitely going to see some CD Sissoko, Dominic Barlow minutes here at some point. And you saw Julian kind of getting some rest tonight. You might see some things like that where like Zach will randomly have a night off, and we'll give Barlow some minutes, or maybe even like Malachi in the future moving forward. Malachi has a night off, or Shetty has a night off. Now I'm thinking about it, it'd probably be more Shetty will have a random night off and we'll play CD maybe. I'm interested for that, but obviously I think that is that's a great pickup. We've talked about that at nauseum, on this channel, and to see Dom Barlow come full circle, and make the San Antonio Spurs, after we were making 20-minute breakdowns on a G Leaguer, G League two-way guy last year. It's just awesome to see. And I think he adds the depth we need. And like I said, I hope we see some rotation minutes from him. But it's not just that, Ethan, because we also signed Raekwon Gray to a two-way contract, as well as Jamari Booyah. I like that last name. He's 24. Both of them are 24, and he's been averaging 29 and 11. His last game in the G League, he had 36, 15, and 8. I know it's the G League, but it's like we definitely, I think, upgraded with this little roster cleanup. Also, moment of silence. Mama Didi Kite, no longer a San Antonio Spur.
If I could take my hat off, I would, but I can't because I got headphones on.
Me too.
Rest in peace, my friend.
But what are your thoughts on the little roster cleanup and moving Dom Barlow to a roster spot, Ethan?
I love it. I couldn't be happier for Dom Barlow. If anyone's deserving of that promotion, it is him. I'm happy for you as his what's surrogate father and
Yes.
biggest fan in probably the NBA. You probably are the biggest Dom Barlow fan outside of his friends and family. So I think it's a good move for us. Obviously, we're high on his potential as far as being a legitimate rotational player down the line. I just hope he can get some meaningful minutes here down the stretch, along with CD Sissoko. And you're technically wrong, Jude. They played together tonight for about 25 seconds. You might have missed that. That's okay.
I turned the game off at that point. Yeah, that's
it
on
was
me.
An impactful last 20 seconds. It's okay.
I turned the game off and missed the Barlow minutes, dude.
He didn't score. He didn't do anything. But I'm sure.
But still, I missed him. Like, just walk on the court. Like,
it would have been cool. It would have been cool for you to see. Just go back and rewind it. I'm sure you can find it somewhere.
I have to see it.
But what was I going to say? I think there's probably a game down the stretch here as we wind down to an end where Pop will rest literally everyone.
Right.
And we'll see a lineup with David Duke Jr. and Sissoko,
who hasn't played a game for the real team yet.
Exactly. Sissoko, Dom Barlow, Booyah. We'll just literally bring everybody and Raekwon, yeah, and they'll all play, and we'll get to see exactly what we have in store for us in the future.
As much as that is a lot of fun commentary there from us, that actually is some legitimate Spurs moves. Like, they made like 3 roster moves in one night. I was like, I'm getting like a bunch of Shams and Woj notifications, and they're all Spurs. So that was just kind of interesting, especially with it, only being like a month and a half left in the season. But it's very eerily reminiscent to last year. So like we said, Ethan, whoever we pick up with some of these late contracts, they might be around here longer than you think. Now, granted, I think kind of the guys we picked up, I don't know if they'll necessarily be on the Spurs roster, but the 3 two-way contracts we have, you very well could see going into next season, all 3 of the same guys. Because really the most value that you're going to get on two-way contracts is from younger guys. And all these guys are 24 and younger. So
I'm with it. Let's do it.
Heck yeah. Well, we appreciate you guys hanging out with us. It is very nice to recap a Spurs win. Before we leave, Ethan, I feel like I haven't brought up enough comments yet this episode. I was about to end it off, but I want to just get to some of the comments here just to give y'all some interaction. Uh, Victor Wembanyama says, smash the like button for Wemby to win Defensive Player of the Year. What do you think about that, Ethan?
I think statistically and impact wise, he is very deserving. However, he will be punished for two reasons. One, he's a rookie. Rookies typically don't win DPOY or really any awards outside of Rookie of the Year. And two, our team's record is so poor that you'll have talking heads talking about this and say, well, how good can he be if they've only won 13 games or whatever it is? So that will be detrimental to him. I think he at least deserves to be all NBA first or second team. I think that that's
Mm-hmm.
pretty clear cut. But DPOY, I don't think it's in the cards this year, Jude.
Yeah, I think he'll definitely be a candidate, Ethan, to say the least.
Yeah, he'll be at
But
the award show. You're right.
I
Yeah.
understand what you're saying. I think there's still a chance. I'm going to hold out hope. I think he has the best argument. Like, I think he
Mm-hmm.
should win Defensive Player of the Year. This entire post game was talking about how the biggest difference tonight was that the bench defense didn't fall off a cliff when he got subbed out. So
Mm,
that's a testament to it,
you're
if
right.
anything, as well as the numbers that back it up.
Mm.
And I think he will get some support for it and some votes, but you're right. Just because of the Spurs record, it kind of is an uphill battle.
But you never know. He is Adam Silver's child.
That is true. They may want this to get started right now.
You never
More
know.
more views from the NBA
Mhm.
award ceremony if Wemby's there and wins something.
He's probably going to be invited, but he probably won't go.
Ooh, I think he
That's
should
my
show
hot
up
take.
masked up, just like he did against the Thunder
I could see that.
and in Toronto.
Him and Rudy walking around together. They might go together.
He's
You know what I
2-0. I just realized that he's 2 and
mean?
okay. It's got to be peace. No, yes, we figured it
Oh!
out. We figured it out. It's
Wait,
peace.
what if I do it? No, it's just
No,
you. Do it again.
no way. For y'all listening on podcast form, I just put up peace twice and the balloons came up in unison, but now they're not coming up again. So it's only getting more confusing. I don't know if we'll get through another episode without balloons, Ethan, but as the last comment here before we wrap up, Aaliyah says, I have a question. What do y'all think the Spurs have done differently? I think she's kind of alluding to these last two games. Or
Mm.
do y'all think they're just in a groove right now and it'll let up eventually? Well, to answer the second half of that question, I think it will eventually let up because I don't think we're going to win the rest of our games this season, kind of like Ethan said earlier when we were talking about the game.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I do think that we are unlocking some things basketball IQ wise that I think just has to do with repetition.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say the same thing. I think we'll see more competitive games. I think we'll see less us shooting ourselves in our foot. That's a weird way to put that. I think we will shoot ourselves in the foot less often, but I don't know if we've suddenly become a play-in or playoff caliber team overnight.
Yeah. And I think the other thing also is Wemby's unlocking some stuff.
Yeah.
And so when that happens on top of us, now almost having a full season playing with him and knowing him better, those things I think are kind of combining at the same time, which have led to these two wins against solid teams. I also think being at home has a little bit to do
Oh,
with it as well.
absolutely, it does.
Yeah. But we appreciate you guys hanging out with us tonight. A Spurs win. Thanks for hanging out. Like we said, don't forget to hit that like button and the subscribe button below if you enjoyed the content. And be sure to follow us on Twitter or the community tab on YouTube to stay updated with all things SSPN at SSPN on YT, at Jude McLaren, and at Ethan_Quintero. We'll catch y'all later. Peace out. Go Spurs, go.